You act like you matter. But let's be clear, you will always be nothing. Imagine hearing those words. Now, imagine holding the power to destroy the person who said them but choosing to teach them a lesson instead. We've all met a Jason Crawford, an arrogant boss who thinks kindness is a weakness and treats people like disposable trash. It makes you lose faith in humanity, doesn't it? It makes you wonder if the bad guys always win. Well, not today. Welcome to a story of ultimate justice. Meet Jason, a CEO blinded by his own ego, and Melanie, the quiet assistant he tormented daily. He thought he was firing a nobody to impress a client. He had no idea he was actually declaring war on the hidden owner of his entire company. Buckle up, because this isn't just a story about revenge, it's a masterclass in humility. You're about to witness the most satisfying downfall in corporate history, a roller coaster of emotion that goes from heartbreaking cruelty to the sweetest redemption you've ever seen. Are you ready to see the bully bow down? If you believe that arrogance should always be checked and that the quiet ones are the most dangerous, then you've found your tribe. Smash that like button to claim your seat, subscribe to join our community of justice seekers, and let's dive straight into the moment Jason made the biggest mistake of his life. The atmosphere in the boardroom was suffocating, thick with the scent of expensive coffee and the palpable tension of workplace drama. Jason Crawford stood at the head of the heavy oak table, projecting the image of a self-made billionaire, though his arrogance was the only thing truly overflowing. He looked down at Melanie Rudolph, his eyes cold and devoid of empathy, treating the moment like a sport. This wasn't just a meeting, it was a public execution of dignity, a classic case of boss versus employee where the power dynamics were painfully skewed. The other executives looked away, studying their manicured fingernails, complicit in their silence as Jason prepared to deliver a blow that was meant to crush her spirit. He didn't just want to correct her, he wanted her humiliated in front of everyone. "Let's be honest, Melanie," Jason began, his voice dripping with a condescending sweetness that was far worse than shouting. "You're clutter. You take up space that could be occupied by someone with vision, someone with actual value." He paced around her chair like a shark circling a wounded seal, enjoying the fear he inspired. It was a display of arrogance so profound it almost felt like a caricature, yet the pain it caused was all too real. In this rich man poor woman scenario, Jason wielded his status like a bludgeon, completely unaware that karma was taking notes in the corner. He leaned in close, ensuring every person in the room could hear the cruelty of his next words. "You think because you work hard, you matter?" He scoffed, checking his gold watch as if her very presence was stealing his precious time. "Hard work is for people who lack genius. You, my dear, will always be nothing." The phrase hung in the air, sucking the oxygen out of the room. It was a heartbreaking moment, truly heart-touching for anyone with a shred of soul, witnessing such unnecessary cruelty. Melanie didn't flinch, though her knuckles turned white as she gripped her notepad. She absorbed the insult with a quiet grace that Jason mistook for weakness, blinding him to the shocking twist that fate was already weaving. He dismissed her with a wave of his hand, a gesture usually reserved for stray dogs or annoying waiters. "Get out of my sight. I have a company to run, and you're ruining the aesthetic." It felt like a pseudo-firing, a rejection of her entire existence within the corporate ecosystem. Jason turned his back on her, confident that he was the untouchable king of his castle. He failed to see the spark in Melanie's eyes, not of tears, but of a steely resolve. The status reversal that would eventually come was unimaginable to him in that moment, for he lived in a bubble of his own ego. Melanie gathered her files, her movements slow and deliberate, a stark contrast to Jason's frantic energy. She didn't storm out, she didn't scream. She simply stood up, smoothing her skirt, maintaining a dignity that money simply cannot buy. This was a life lesson in composure, though Jason was too busy admiring his reflection in the glass window to notice. The seeds of revenge, or perhaps a more poetic justice served, are often planted in these quiet moments of disrespect. She walked to the door, the sound of her heels echoing like a ticking clock counting down to his reckoning. As the heavy door clicked shut behind her, Jason let out a laugh, inviting the room to join in his mockery. "Some people just don't know their place," he sneered, unaware that he had just insulted the one person holding his chaotic department together. He believed he was destined for endless promotion and praise, never suspecting that he had just set the stage for his own downfall. It's funny how the arrogant CEO is always the last to know that the floor is about to drop out from under him. The room returned to business, but the energy had shifted. The ghost of his cruelty lingered. What Jason didn't realize was that Melanie wasn't just an assistant taking notes, she was an observer collecting data. Every insult, every sneer, every overlooked contribution was being catalogued. He thought he had won a battle of wits, but he was fighting an unarmed opponent, or so he thought. The story of Jason Crawford and Melanie Rudolph was far from over. In fact, the real game had just begun. And in the game of corporate chess, the pawn you dismiss is often the queen in disguise, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. To understand the magnitude of Jason's impending fall, we have to look at the machinery behind the curtain. While Jason spent his mornings engaging in long, strategic brunches that looked suspiciously like office romance dates with potential clients, Melanie was the engine room. She arrived at 6 a.m. sharp, the hum of the servers her only company, fixing the disasters Jason had created the day before. The narrative of rich man poor woman suggests a difference in bank accounts, but here, the true poverty was in Jason's work ethic. He was the figurehead, the arrogant CEO on the magazine cover, while Melanie was the ghostwriter of his entire success. Melanie's desk was a command center of efficiency, buried under stacks of reports that Jason couldn't even decipher, let alone analyze. She corrected his emails, balanced the department's budget, and smoothed over rifts with angry vendors, all while he took credit for the seamless operations. It was a daily workplace drama where the hero went unsung. Whenever a promotion was rumored, Jason would laugh off the idea of Melanie advancing, claiming she was too valuable right where she is, which is corporate code for exploitation. She was trapped in a cycle of competence that punished her for being too good at her job. The contrast between them was cinematic. Jason would strut in at 10 a.m., smelling of leisure and entitlement, barking orders for coffee and visionary ideas. Melanie, having already worked 4 hours, would hand him a prepared dossier, which he would glance at and toss aside. "Make it pop more," he'd say, a vague critique from a man who didn't understand the content. It was a heart-touching display of patience on her part. She wasn't just an employee, she was the architect of his reputation, a fact he was too blinded by arrogance to see. He treated her like furniture, unaware that she was the load-bearing wall. Deep down, Melanie possessed a brilliance that intimidated insecure men like Jason. She understood market trends, fiscal nuance, and human psychology skills she masked under the guise of a humble assistant. This undercover boss vibe wasn't official yet, but spiritually, she was already running the company. She watched Jason make blunder after blunder, stepping in quietly to steer the ship away from the rocks. It was a thankless task, fueled by a private necessity that Jason never bothered to ask about. He saw a worker bee, he missed the queen. Often, Jason would bring in other executives to brag about his latest projections, numbers Melanie had crunched until midnight. "It's all about instinct," he would brag, leaning back in his leather chair. Melanie would stand in the corner, holding the tray of water, a silent witness to his theft. The desire for justice served must have burned within her, but she kept her expression neutral. She knew that instant regret wasn't something you could force, it had to be a natural consequence of incompetence exposed. She was playing the long game. Colleagues whispered about it, of course. They saw the boss versus employee dynamic and pitied her, but fear of Jason's temper kept them silent. They didn't know that Melanie wasn't looking for pity. She was enduring this for a reason, her resilience forged in fires they couldn't imagine. While Jason worried about his golf handicap, Melanie worried about survival, about protecting something or someone far more important than quarterly gains. This disparity in motivation is what made her dangerous. A person with nothing to lose is formidable, a person with everything to protect is unstoppable. So, while Jason preened and posed, believing he was a god among insects, Melanie continued to work. She fixed his typos, she saved his contracts, she essentially lived his work life for him. He thought she was dependent on his benevolence, never realizing the terrifying truth he was entirely, hopelessly dependent on her competence. The stage was set for a status reversal of epic proportions, built on the fragile foundation of one man's ego and one woman's secret strength. Jason Crawford had a philosophy: fear commands respect, and kindness invites rebellion. He viewed Melanie's interactions with the staff not as team building, but as a waste of company time. When Melanie took 5 minutes to ask the janitor about his sick daughter, Jason rolled his eyes, labeling it inefficient chatter. In his world of billionaire aspirations, people were resources, not human beings. He consistently overlooked her brilliance because it was wrapped in empathy, a trait he considered a fatal flaw in the cutthroat world of workplace drama. To him, her softness was proof she would never rise above her station. "You're too soft, Melanie," he would chide, sipping the espresso she had perfectly timed for his arrival. "You treat these people like they're your friends. It's embarrassing." He couldn't see that her softness was actually social capital. The staff would walk through fire for Melanie because she remembered their birthdays and listened to their problems. Jason, the arrogant CEO, couldn't get a printer fixed without threatening to fire someone. This disconnect was the core of their boss versus employee friction. He thought he was teaching her a life lesson on leadership, while she was quietly cleaning up the toxic spills of his personality. There was a day when Melanie suggested a new workflow that would save the team hours of overtime. It was a brilliant, empathetic solution to burnout. Jason laughed it off in front of the team. "We don't pay them to be comfortable, Melanie. We pay them to work." He dismissed her insight as emotional clutter, missing the efficiency hiding inside the compassion. It was a moment that could have been heart-touching if he had listened, but instead, it fueled the quiet resentment of the staff. They saw justice served not in his profits, but in her quiet rebellion of caring. He treated her kindness like a disease he was trying to cure. "You need to be a killer," he'd say, mimicking the wolves of Wall Street he idolized. "You'll always be nothing if you can't step on a few necks." Melanie would just smile that enigmatic smile, knowing that karma doesn't require you to be a killer, it just requires you to wait. Her weakness was actually her armor. By being underestimated, she became invisible, allowing her to observe the cracks in his armor that he was too busy polishing to notice. This blindness extended to her professional output. Because she was polite, he assumed she wasn't sharp. Because she didn't brag, he assumed she had nothing to boast about. It's a classic mistake in the rich man poor woman trope, assuming net worth equals intelligence. Jason missed the strategic mind operating behind the pleasantries. He didn't realize that the shocking twist of his life would come from the very person he deemed too nice to be a threat. He was poking a sleeping lion, believing it was a domestic cat. One afternoon, he caught her helping an intern fix a complex coding error. Instead of praising her mentorship, he reprimanded her for doing other people's work. He humiliated her for being helpful, twisting a virtue into a vice. "If they can't do it, we fire them. That's how it works," he barked. Melanie didn't argue. She knew that redemption for the company wouldn't come from his top-down tyranny, but from the bottom-up loyalty she was building. She was playing a completely different game, one where humanity was an asset, not a liability. Jason's arrogance was a wall that kept reality out. He felt powerful making her feel small, not realizing that every time he mocked her kindness, he was isolating himself further. He was building an empire on fear, while she was building a network on trust. And when the storm finally hit, as it inevitably would, he would look around for support and find an empty room, while she would have an army at her back. His disdain for her weakness was, ironically, his greatest vulnerability. The crisis hit on a Tuesday, the kind of catastrophic failure that turns a workplace drama into a survival horror. A critical merger file, the backbone of the quarter's revenue, had been corrupted due to Jason's negligence in approving security protocols. The board was in a panic, the partners were threatening lawsuits, and Jason, the usually unflappable arrogant CEO, was sweating through his Italian suit. He had no idea how to fix it. He paced his office, blaming everyone but himself, terrified of the humiliated state that awaited him if this deal collapsed. While Jason was busy hyperventilating and drafting excuses, Melanie quietly went to work. It was a situation that required not just hard work, but genius. She bypassed the corrupted servers, utilized backups she had kept against protocol knowing Jason's incompetence, and manually reconstructed the data architecture. It was a feat of brilliance that should have earned her a massive promotion. She worked through the night, fueled by cheap coffee and pure determination, her silhouette a lonely beacon in the dark office. She wasn't doing it for him, she was doing it to save the jobs of the colleagues he would inevitably scapegoat. By morning, the crisis was averted. The files were restored, the deal was saved, and the company was back on solid ground. Melanie, eyes red-rimmed and exhausted, placed the pristine report on Jason's desk just as he walked in, looking like a man marching to the gallows. He stared at the file, then at her. For a second, there was a flicker of something like respect, or perhaps fear. But then, the arrogant CEO mask slipped back into place. He snatched the file, his relief instantly mutating back into entitlement. "I see you finally did what I asked," he muttered, rewriting history in real time. He walked into the emergency board meeting, chest puffed out, holding Melanie's work like a trophy. He spun a tale of his own late-night heroics, his visionary leadership, his instinct that saved the day. Melanie stood in the back, the invisible architect, watching him steal her glory. It was a gut-wrenching moment of boss versus employee injustice. There was no thank you, no acknowledgement. Just a thief in a suit taking a bow for a masterpiece he didn't paint. The board applauded, relieved and impressed by Jason's clutch performance. They patted him on the back, calling him a savior. Melanie felt the sting of instant regret, not for saving the company, but for letting him shine yet again. But she held her tongue. To speak up now would look like petty jealousy. In this rich man poor woman dynamic, her word against his was a losing battle. She swallowed the bitterness, adding it to the growing stockpile of grievances that would eventually fuel her revenge. Jason emerged from the meeting, high on the adrenaline of his fraudulent victory. He walked past Melanie, tossing the file onto her desk. "Next time, try to have it ready sooner," he said, a comment so detached from reality it was almost comical. He truly believed his own lie. He had convinced himself that her execution was merely the result of his brilliant direction. It was a masterclass in gaslighting. He didn't know that justice served was a dish best eaten cold, and he was currently stuffing himself with appetizers. This theft was the turning point. Melanie realized that as long as she stayed in the shadows, Jason would continue to grow like a fungus in the dark. His arrogance was now a danger to the very existence of the firm. She had saved him this time, but the experience solidified a cold hard truth: he was incapable of leading. The shocking twist wasn't that he stole credit, it was that he was stupid enough to think he could keep getting away with it without eventually paying the price. Why did she stay? It was the question that hung in the air like smoke. Why would a woman of such obvious talent and resilience endure the daily torture of an arrogant CEO like Jason Crawford? The answer wasn't lack of ambition, it was a brutal reality of the rich man-poor woman divide. Melanie wasn't just working for a paycheck, she was working for a life. Secretly, hidden from the prying eyes of the office gossip mill, she was the sole caretaker for a sick family member. The insurance policy attached to her job wasn't a perk, it was a lifeline. Every time Jason sneered, every time he made a demand that bordered on workplace drama absurdity, Melanie pictured the hospital machines, the expensive medication, the face of the person she loved relying on her. This was the golden handcuff that kept her tethered to Jason's tyranny. She swallowed her pride daily, a bitter pill that allowed her to pay the bills. It was a heart-touching sacrifice, a silent martyrdom that gave her the strength to endure the unendurable. She wasn't weak, she was effectively a hostage to the American healthcare system. Jason, of course, interpreted her loyalty as desperation or lack of options. "You'd be lost without this job, Melanie," he would taunt, dangling her employment over her head like a sword. He didn't know that his threats of firing sent ice through her veins, not because she feared him, but because she feared the lapse in coverage. He was exploiting a vulnerability he didn't even know existed, adding a layer of moral repulsion to his arrogance. He was playing God with someone's survival, thinking it was just a power game. There were nights when Melanie cried in the bathroom, the weight of the status reversal she craved pressing down on her chest. She dreamed of the day she could walk away, of the redemption of her own freedom. But then the medical bills would arrive, astronomical and terrifying, and she would dry her eyes, straighten her blazer, and walk back into the lion's den. She traded her dignity for medicine, a transaction that happens too often in the shadows of the corporate world. She kept this struggle completely hidden. To reveal it would be to give Jason another weapon, another way to mock her personal drama. She maintained the facade of the efficient, if somewhat dowdy, assistant. This secrecy added to the shocking twist that was brewing. Everyone assumed she was just a career admin, never guessing the high-stakes battle she was fighting on the home front. Karma was watching this silent struggle, weighing the scales against Jason with every cruel remark he made to a woman fighting a war he couldn't comprehend. Occasionally, Jason would complain about his own hardships: a scratched Bentley, a reservation mix-up at a Michelin star restaurant. Melanie would listen, nodding sympathetically while calculating the cost of his lunch against a week of dialysis. The disconnect was nauseating. It highlighted the billionaire mindset bubble he lived in, completely insulated from the real-world struggles of the people who made him rich. He had no idea that the woman he called nothing was carrying a burden that would crush him in a day. This hidden motivation transformed Melanie's narrative from one of submission to one of heroic endurance. She wasn't a victim, she was a warrior in disguise. Every insult she swallowed was a strategic move to keep the lifeline intact. She was buying time, waiting for the moment when the scales would tip, when she could finally unclasp the handcuffs and show Jason exactly what happens when you corner a person who has been fighting for their life every single day. The annual company gala was the crown jewel of the social calendar, a night of glitter, champagne, and performative workplace drama. For Jason, it was his stage. He spent weeks tailoring his tuxedo, preening about the networking opportunities and the social standing of the attendees. For Melanie, however, the night approached like a storm front. While the office buzzed with talk of dresses and limos, Jason dropped a stack of archived tax audits on her desk at 4:30 p.m. on the day of the event. "I need these reconciled by morning," he said, adjusting his silk bow tie in the reflection of her monitor. Someone has to keep the lights on while the important people network. It was a deliberate exclusion, a way to reinforce the boss versus employee caste system. He was going to the ball. She was Cinderella, but without the fairy godmother. The cruelty was precise. He knew she had never been invited, and he wanted to make sure she knew exactly why. In his eyes, she didn't belong in his world of billionaire pretend play. As night fell, the office emptied, leaving Melanie alone in the pool of blue light from her computer screen. Outside, the rain began to fall, mirroring the gloom inside. She could see the photos populating social media: Jason laughing with investors, holding a flute of champagne, looking every bit the arrogant CEO. He was mocking her even from a distance, posting captions about teamwork and leadership while his actual team was enslaved to his paperwork. It was a scene ripe for instant regret, had Jason possessed the capacity for self-reflection. He even called her from the party, slurring slightly, the background noise of jazz and laughter serving as a cruel soundtrack. "Just checking in, Melanie. Don't fall asleep on the job. We can't have you ruining my momentum." He was taunting her, using her exclusion to boost his own ego. "You know, it's a shame you don't have the social standing for these things. It's a different world." The words cut deep. He was weaponizing class, reinforcing the rich man-poor woman divide with surgical precision. Melanie worked through the tears of frustration, the sheer injustice of it burning in her chest. She wasn't envious of the party, she was tired of the dehumanization. She paused, looking out the window at the city lights, wondering if justice served was just a myth parents told children. But in that silence, her resolve hardened. She finished the work not for him, but to prove that she could survive anything he threw at her. She was forging herself into steel while he was out drinking himself soft. The contrast was stark. Jason, surrounded by sycophants and fake friends, drinking to a success he hadn't earned. Melanie, alone in the silence, actually doing the work that sustained the illusion. It was a heart-touching tableau of integrity versus vanity. He thought leaving her behind made him look powerful, but it only highlighted his fear. He couldn't risk having her there. Her competence might outshine his charisma. He needed her hidden to maintain his lie. By the time Jason stumbled home, feeling like the king of the world, Melanie was just turning off the office lights. She had missed the party, but she had kept the company safe for another day. She walked to the bus stop in the rain, exhausted but unbroken. Jason had his gala, but Melanie had the truth. And as any good storyteller knows, the truth has a funny way of crashing the party eventually. The shocking twist was approaching, and no amount of champagne would be able to drown it out. The morning after the gala, the hangover wasn't the only thing hitting Jason. A discrepancy was flagged by the federal regulator. A massive, glaring error in the quarterly filing that Jason had reviewed, glanced at before submitting. It was the kind of mistake that leads to investigations, fines, and jail time. It was a billionaire's nightmare. Jason turned pale, his arrogance evaporating instantly into panic. He sat in his office, head in hands, realizing he had potentially destroyed the company with a single signature. But before the regulators could knock on the door, Melanie intervened. She had spotted the error during her late-night exile while he was partying. Quietly, without fanfare, she had drafted an amendment, filed the correction, and smoothed over the data with the regulatory liaison she had built a rapport with over the years. She didn't do it to save Jason, she did it to save the company's reputation and the jobs of her coworkers. It was an act of profound integrity, a heart-touching display of duty in the face of abuse. She walked into Jason's office and placed the confirmation of the correction on his desk. "It's handled," she said simply. Jason looked at the paper, then at her, his eyes wide with shock. He realized what she had done. She had pulled him back from the edge of the cliff. For a fleeting second, the status reversal was palpable. He was the screw-up, she was the savior. But instead of gratitude, a toxic defense mechanism kicked in. He couldn't handle the debt he owed her. "Well, it's about time you caught something," he snapped, his voice trembling with residual fear that he masked as anger. "That's why I pay you. To check the details so I can focus on the big picture." He snatched the paper, hiding his shaking hands. He was rewriting the narrative again, framing her heroism as mere administrative duty. It was a sickening display of boss versus employee gaslighting. He refused to say thank you because acknowledging her help would mean acknowledging his own incompetence. Melanie didn't argue. She saw the fear behind his eyes, the pathetic fragility of his ego. She realized then that he wasn't a monster, he was a small, scared man in a big chair. This realization didn't excuse his behavior, but it changed her perspective. She wasn't afraid of him anymore. Karma was already circling him, she didn't need to push. She had saved him from the law, but she couldn't save him from himself. This incident was the ultimate test of character. Jason failed it spectacularly, choosing pride over humility. Melanie passed with flying colors, choosing integrity over spite. The life lesson here was clear: character is what you do when no one is watching, and Jason had none. He thought he had dodged a bullet, but he had actually just loaded the gun that would eventually fire him. He mistook her silence for submission, not realizing it was the silence of a judge who has already reached a verdict. He went back to his bluster, louder than before, to drown out his insecurity. He treated her even worse that afternoon, as if punishing her for witnessing his vulnerability. But the dynamic had shifted. Melanie walked with a new lightness. She knew the truth of who held the power. She had held his fate in her hands and spared him. Next time, she might not be so generous. The road to redemption was closing for Jason, and he was flooring the gas pedal toward the cliff edge. Jason mistook Melanie's silence for total surrender. Emboldened by her covering his tracks, he pushed the boundaries of workplace drama into the realm of psychological warfare. He began to pile impossible demands on her, treating her not just as an assistant, but as a servant. Pick up my dry cleaning, walk my dog, rewrap these gifts for my mistress. The lines between professional and personal were obliterated. He fed on her compliance, his arrogance swelling like a tick. He thought he had broken her spirit completely. You don't talk back because you know him, right? He would goad her, leaning over her desk while she juggled 3 phones. You need me. You're nothing without the structure I provide. It was a mantra he repeated to reassure himself of his dominance. The abuse became verbal and constant. He criticized her clothes, her voice, her lack of ambition. It was a classic boss versus employee toxicity, but dialed up to a fever pitch. He was trying to crush the witness to his incompetence. But silence is not always submission. Sometimes, it is the gathering of a storm. Melanie was reaching her limit. The heart-touching reason for her endurance: her sick family member was improving, the financial pressure easing slightly. The handcuffs were loosening. Jason, oblivious to her personal life, didn't sense the shift. He kept pushing, mistaking the calm before the storm for a permanent climate. He was dancing on a landmine. One afternoon, he threw a stack of papers at her because a font was wrong. The papers scattered across the floor, a physical manifestation of his chaotic leadership. Pick them up, he ordered, pointing a finger. The office went silent. Everyone watched. This was the moment of humiliated spectacle he loved to create. But Melanie didn't move immediately. She looked at the papers, then up at him. Her eyes were different, cold, detached, calculating. I said, pick them up. Jason shouted, his voice cracking. He needed her to obey to validate his power. Melanie slowly bent down, not in submission, but with the deliberate slowness of someone deciding their next move. She gathered the papers, her mind racing. The instant regret wasn't hers, it was waiting for him. She realized that saving him repeatedly was not justice served, it was enabling a tyrant. This was the breaking point. The tether snapped. She handed him the papers, her hand steady. Here you go, Jason, she said, using his first name without the honorific Mr. for the first time. It was a subtle rebellion, a tiny crack in the dam. Jason blinked, sensing the change but too stupid to identify it. That's better, he grumbled, retreating to his office. He didn't know he had just lost his greatest asset. The shocking twist was in motion. Melanie wasn't going to quit, she was going to let him fail. She was done covering his mistakes. She was done being the invisible safety net. If he wanted to be the billionaire genius, he would have to be one without her help. She went back to her desk, but the nothing girl was gone. In her place sat a strategist waiting for the inevitable collapse. Karma had arrived, and she was wearing sensible heels. The collapse began with a whim. A potential client, a high-flying tech mogul named Sterling, came to visit. Jason was desperate to impress, putting on his best arrogant CEO performance. During the tour, Sterling made a passing, rude comment about the office looking cluttered and glanced vaguely in the direction of Melanie's desk, which was piled high with the work Jason refused to do. Jason, in a panic to please the client and look decisive, made a snap decision that would seal his fate. You're right, Jason said, his voice loud enough for the floor to hear. We need to trim the fat. Melanie. He summoned her like a dog. When she approached, he didn't hesitate. Pack your things. You're fired. We're moving in a more streamlined direction. It was a firing born of pure vanity, a blood sacrifice to impress a stranger. The room gasped. This was the shocking twist no one saw coming, or perhaps, the inevitable climax of his cruelty. Melanie stood frozen. The instant regret should have hit Jason then, but he was too busy smiling at Sterling, looking for approval. Effective immediately, Jason added, twisting the knife. Security will escort you out. He wanted her humiliated, wanted to show he was a ruthless leader who could cut cords without emotion. He was destroying the pillar of his department to fix a cosmetic crack. For a moment, Melanie looked devastated. The color drained from her face. The insurance, the stability, it was gone in a second. It looked like total defeat. The rich man poor woman dynamic had reached its nadir. The rich man had crushed the poor woman for sport. She looked at him, searching for a trace of humanity, but found only the smug grin of a man who thought he had just made a power move. "Are you sure about this, Jason?" she asked quietly. "Never been more sure," he scoffed. "Go be nothing somewhere else." It was the echo of topic 1, the closing of a painful loop. Melanie nodded slowly. She didn't beg. She didn't scream. She simply turned and walked to her desk. She packed a single box of photo, a plant, and a small notebook. The walk to the elevator was a funeral march for the company's future, though only she knew it. As the elevator doors closed, cutting off the view of Jason laughing with the client, the audience feels the weight of justice served denied. It feels like evil has won. This is the false defeat, the moment where hope seems extinguished. Melanie is out on the street, holding a box, seemingly powerless. Jason is up in the tower, drinking scotch. But the narrative is a pendulum, and it had swung as far as it could in one direction. The physics of karma dictated that the swing back would be violent. Jason had just fired the brain, the heart, and the conscience of his operation. He thought he was cleaning house. In reality, he had just removed the load-bearing column of his entire life. The life lesson was about to be delivered, express shipping, with no return policy. Melanie walked into the crowded street, not looking back, leaving Jason to the chaos he had unknowingly unleashed upon himself. The morning after Melanie's departure, the silence in the office was deafening. Jason strolled in at 10 o'clock a.m., expecting business as usual, perhaps even a cleaner vibe. Instead, he walked into a war zone of confusion. The phones were ringing off the hook, red lights blinking like warning beacons. His coffee wasn't on his desk. His schedule was blank. The workplace drama had shifted from psychological tension to logistical anarchy. "Where is the Henderson file?" Jason barked at a passing intern. The intern stared at him blankly. "Melanie always handled the filing, sir. We don't have the passwords." Jason froze. He realized with a jolt of instant regret that he didn't know the passwords either. He tried to log into the main server, access denied. He tried to find the contact for the biggest vendor. The Rolodex was empty. Melanie kept it all in her head or her private logs. The arrogant CEO was suddenly locked out of his own kingdom. By noon, the chaos was palpable. Meetings were missed because Melanie wasn't there to remind him. Clients were angry because their emails bounced back or went unanswered. Jason tried to do the work himself, but he stared at the spreadsheets like they were written in alien hieroglyphs. He had no idea how the formulas worked. He had taken credit for her work for so long he had forgotten he didn't actually know how to do it. The status reversal was happening in real time. The company was bringing him to his knees. He called in 3 different assistants to replace her. None lasted more than an hour. They asked questions he couldn't answer. "How do we process the invoices?" "I don't know, just do it." He screamed, his arrogance crumbling into hysteria. He was hemorrhaging money and credibility by the hour. The staff watched with a mix of fear and schadenfreude. This was justice served by the invisible hand of competence or the lack thereof. Jason sat in his office, tie loosened, sweat beading on his forehead. The room felt bigger, emptier. He looked at Melanie's empty desk outside his glass wall. It stood there like a tombstone. He reached for the phone to call her, to beg her to come back, but pride stopped him. "I don't need her," he muttered, lying to himself even as the walls closed in. She was nothing. "I can fix this." But he couldn't. He was a billionaire on paper, but a pauper in skill. The life lesson was hitting him hard. You don't appreciate the air until you're choking. Jason was choking. The intricate web of lies and credit stealing he had built was unraveling. The fat he had trimmed was actually the muscle, bone, and sinew of the corporation. He was just the suit. Without Melanie, he was a puppet with cut strings, collapsing on the stage. As the sun set on the first day without her, the stock value of his department had dipped. Rumors of incompetence were leaking to the board. The shocking twist for Jason wasn't that the job was hard, it was that he was completely useless. He had fired his survival kit. The spiral had begun, and there was no one left to catch him. The wolf was at the door, and he had fired the sheepdog. Just as Jason was drowning in the operational chaos, the shark smelled blood in the water. A mysterious investment firm known as Apex Holdings initiated a hostile takeover. It was aggressive, swift, and lethal. They had clearly been watching, waiting for a moment of weakness. The firing of Melanie and the subsequent operational collapse was the signal they needed. This wasn't just workplace drama anymore, it was corporate warfare. The board of directors was in a full-blown panic. They summoned Jason, screaming about stock prices and vulnerability. Who is behind Apex? They demanded. Jason, exhausted and disheveled from days of trying to do Melanie's job, had no answers. His arrogance was stripped away, replaced by the raw fear of a man watching his empire burn. He tried to bluster, to use his charm, but without the data Melanie used to provide, his words were empty calories. Rumors swirled that Apex was ruthless, a firm that bought broken companies, gutted management, and rebuilt from scratch. The term firing was whispered in every corridor, but this time, it was Jason's head on the block. The status reversal was accelerating. The hunter was now the hunted. Jason realized that without his nothing assistant to navigate the legal defenses, he was defenseless. The takeover bid was finalized in record time. Apex acquired the majority share. The company belonged to them. Jason sat in his office, staring at the skyline, feeling the crushing weight of karma. If he hadn't fired Melanie, the chaos wouldn't have happened. If the chaos hadn't happened, the stock wouldn't have dipped. If the stock hadn't dipped, Apex wouldn't have struck. It was a direct line from his cruelty to his destruction. He received a summons. The new majority shareholder wanted to meet the CEO immediately. This was it. The moment of judgment. Jason tried to rally his old self, the smooth-talking billionaire, but the mirror showed a tired, scared fraud. He adjusted his tie, trying to hide the tremor in his hands. He hoped, prayed, that he could charm this new owner, whoever they were. Maybe he could spin a story. Maybe he could blame the previous staff for the mess. The irony was thick. He was preparing to meet his new boss, terrified of being humiliated, just as he had terrified Melanie for years. The life lesson was circling back. He walked to the boardroom, the same room where he had told Melanie she was nothing. The ghosts of his past behavior were lining the hallway, jeering at him. The board members were already there, silent and pale. They looked at Jason with disdain. He had failed them. The seat at the head of the table, his seat was empty, waiting for the conqueror. Jason took a side seat, a demotion in itself. The air was heavy with anticipation. The door handle turned. The shocking twist was about to walk through the door, and Jason Crawford was not ready. Jason sat at the conference table, his palms sweating against the mahogany. He spent the minutes before the arrival rehearsing his pitch. He would be the victim of incompetent staff, he would be the visionary held back by a lack of talent around him. His arrogance, though bruised, was his only shield. "I can handle this," he whispered to himself. "I'm Jason Crawford. I run this place." He was trying to manifest a reality that no longer existed. He looked around the room at the other board members. They avoided his eyes. They knew the score. This was a boss versus employee meeting where Jason was about to find out he was just an employee. But Jason clung to the fantasy. He imagined the new owner as some old, out-of-touch tycoon he could manipulate. He would use the jargon Melanie had taught him, flash the smile that had graced magazine covers. He prepared to charm his way out of the gallows. "Gentlemen," Jason said, clearing his throat, trying to command the room. "Whoever this is, they need us. They need me. I am the face of this brand. It was a pathetic display of hubris. A billionaire in debt to the truth. The board members shifted uncomfortably. One of them finally spoke up. Jason, shut up. You lost the company in a week. Just pray they don't sue us for negligence. The rebuke was sharp, a stinging slap of workplace drama reality. The clock ticked. Every second felt like an hour. Jason checked his reflection in his watch face. He needed to look powerful. He needed to look like he belonged. He thought about Melanie for a fleeting second, how she used to prepare briefing dossiers on anyone he met. He had nothing. He was flying blind. The instant regret of firing her pricked at him again, but he shoved it down. He had to survive. He stood up as the heavy oak doors unlocked from the outside. Showtime, he muttered, buttoning his jacket. He put on the mask of the successful executive, the arrogant CEO who was too big to fail. He prepared to extend his hand, to dominate the handshake, to set the tone. He was ready to lie, to cheat, to do whatever it took to keep his throne. He expected a team of lawyers. He expected an elderly man in a gray suit. He expected an enemy he could understand. He did not expect the silence that fell over the room as the door swung open. He did not expect the perfumia scent that was vaguely, hauntingly familiar. Jason's smile was plastered on his face, rigid and fake. He stepped forward, hand extended into the empty air, ready to greet his fate. He was about to learn that karma doesn't just knock, it kicks the door down. The charade was over. The truth was walking in. The door opened fully, and the click of high heels on the parquet floor echoed like gunshots. Into the room walked a woman radiating power. She wore a tailored white suit that cost more than Jason's car, her hair styled in a sleek, commanding cut. It took Jason's brain a full 3 seconds to process the visual information. The silhouette was familiar, but the presence was alien. The woman turned, and the shocking twist hit Jason like a physical blow to the gut. It was Melanie. But it wasn't the Melanie he knew. Gone was the dowdy cardigan, the slumped shoulders, the aura of servitude. This was Melanie Rudolph, the heiress to the Apex Holdings empire, the undercover boss who had been hiding in plain sight. The room gasped collectively. Jason's extended hand trembled in the air, then dropped to his side as if paralyzed. His jaw literally unhinged. Melanie? He croaked, his voice cracking like a teenager's. She didn't smile. She didn't look like the rich man poor woman victim anymore. She walked to the head of the table, his chair, and sat down with the fluidity of a queen taking her throne. She placed a single folder on the table. "Hello, Jason," she said. Her voice was the same, yet completely different. It held the weight of billions. The status reversal was absolute. The woman he had called nothing now owned everything, including him. I don't understand," Jason stammered, looking around the room for an explanation. You fetch my coffee. You fix the printer." The arrogant CEO was malfunctioning. His reality was shattering. Melanie intertwined her fingers, looking at him with a gaze that dissected his soul. "I was learning the business from the ground up," she explained calmly. "My father insisted I understand the machinery before I took the wheel. I wanted to see how the leadership treated the invisible people." The realization washed over Jason in a cold wave of humiliated horror. She had seen everything. Every insult. Every stolen idea. Every moment of cruelty. She hadn't just been his assistant, she had been his auditor. The workplace drama he thought he was directing was actually her test, and he had failed every single question. You own Apex?" He whispered, the color draining from his face until he looked like a ghost. "I am Apex," she corrected. "And I've seen enough to know exactly what is wrong with this company." She paused, letting the silence stretch until it was agonizing. "The problem isn't the market. It isn't the product. It's the culture. It's you." The words were delivered without shouting, which made them infinitely more terrifying. This was justice served on a silver platter. Jason backed away, hitting the wall. There was nowhere to run. The billionaire facade was gone. He was just a man who had bullied the wrong woman. The shocking twist wasn't just her identity, it was the depth of his own blindness. He had looked at a diamond every day and treated it like glass. Now, the diamond was cutting him. Jason froze in pure terror. His mind raced back through the years. The topic: one humiliation, you'll always be nothing. The mocking at the gala. The firing. Every cruel word he had ever spoken to her replayed in his mind like a horror movie compilation. He realized with sickening clarity that he hadn't just insulted an employee, he had insulted his judge, jury, and executioner. The instant regret was a physical nausea rising in his throat. He looked at Melanie, searching for the submissive woman he used to dominate, but she was gone. In her place was a titan of industry. "Melanie, please," he began, his voice shaking. It was just business. A management style. I didn't know. He trailed off, realizing how pathetic he sounded. "You didn't know I was rich?" Melanie finished for him, an eyebrow raised. "Would it have mattered if I wasn't?" "That's the point, Jason. You treat people based on their value to you, not their value as human beings." The heart-touching truth of her words silenced the room. Jason felt small. Microscopic. He realized his entire career, his entire identity as the arrogant CEO, was a sham she had allowed to continue. She held his future in her manicured hands. She could fire him. She could sue him. She could destroy his reputation in the industry forever. He was at her mercy, and he had shown her none. "I have a family," Jason blurted out, a desperate, hypocritical plea considering how he had treated her own family's struggles. "Please, don't destroy me." He was begging. The boss versus employee dynamic had inverted so completely that the board members were looking at their shoes in embarrassment. It was painful to watch. The bully was crying. Melanie watched him, her expression unreadable. She wasn't enjoying his pain, that was the difference between them. She wasn't cruel. She felt a profound pity for a man so hollow he had to break others to feel whole. "I'm not going to destroy you, Jason," she said quietly. "You did that yourself when you fired the only person who knew how to do your job." The terror in Jason's eyes was the realization of karma. It wasn't a mystical force, it was cause and effect. He had sown cruelty and was now harvesting fear. He waited for the axe to fall, for the words "you're fired" to echo back at him. He knew he deserved it. He knew this was justice served. He braced himself for the end of his life as he knew it. But Melanie didn't speak immediately. She let him sit in the terror. She let him feel the powerlessness he had inflicted on her and so many others. It was a necessary fire, burning away the ego to see if there was anything human left underneath. Jason closed his eyes, waiting for the impact. The life lesson was searing itself into his DNA. "I'm not going to fire you, Jason," Melanie said, her voice cutting through his panic. Jason's eyes snapped open. Hope, fragile and desperate, flickered in his chest. "But," she continued, raising a finger, "you cannot stay as CEO." The hope wavered. She stood up and walked around the table, stopping right in front of him. The rich man poor woman visual was gone now, it was just power and humility. "You have talent, Jason. You have charisma. But you lack the most important thing, humanity." She gestured to the open door. "I'm offering you a job. But not in this office. Not in a suit." The board watched, captivated. This was a shocking twist of mercy. Instead of the guillotine, she was offering rehabilitation. "You will start in the mailroom," Melanie declared. "Minimum wage. No assistant. You will learn people's names. You will learn what they actually do. You will learn to serve before you can ever lead again." It was a punishment, yes, but it was also an opportunity for redemption. It was an act of grace rather than cruelty. An arrogant CEO would have fired him. A true leader offered him a path to change. Jason stared at her. The mailroom? Him. The indignity was sharp, but the alternative was oblivion. He looked at her face, searching for mockery, but found only stern expectation. She was serious. She was giving him a chance to rebuild himself from the ground up, to find the substance he had been faking for years. It was a heart-touching offer of salvation disguised as a demotion. If you walk out that door, Melanie said, you are done in this industry. I will make sure of it. But if you take this job, if you humble yourself, you might just earn your way back. Not to the top, but to somewhere real. It was the ultimate life lesson. Success isn't about the view from the office, it's about the respect of the people on the floor. Jason swallowed his pride. It tasted like ash. He looked at his hands, soft and uncalloused. He thought about the nothing girl who had saved him time and time again. He realized she was saving him one last time. She was saving him from becoming a monster. This was justice served with a side of compassion. Jason started, his voice rough. He looked at the board, then at Melanie. The status reversal was complete. He was no longer the boss. He was the student. "I'll take it," he whispered. It was the first honest thing he had said in years. 6 months later. The scene is the company lobby. Jason Crawford is wearing a blue polo shirt, pushing a mail cart. He looks different, tired, yes, but lighter. The bloat of alcohol and ego is gone. He stops at a desk, handing a package to the receptionist, knowing her name is Sarah and asking about her kids. He is learning. He is growing. The arrogance has been sweated out of him through hard labor. The elevator doors open, and Melanie walks out, surrounded by executives who are actually listening to her. She looks radiant, the true leader the company needed. She spots Jason. The hallway goes quiet. It's the final beat of our boss versus employee saga. She stops in front of him. There is no mockery in her eyes, only a question. Jason straightens up. He doesn't look away. He doesn't feel humiliated anymore, he feels real. He reaches into his pocket and pulls out his paycheck, a meager sum compared to his old salary, but one he actually earned. He looks at the signature at the bottom, Melanie Rudolph. "Here is the mail, Ms. Rudolph," Jason says, his voice steady and respectful. He hands her a stack of letters. It is a moment of profound redemption. The man who once said you'll always be nothing is now serving the woman who became his everything, his boss, his mentor, his savior. Melanie takes the letters. She smiles, a genuine, warm smile. "Good work, Jason. Keep it up." She starts to walk away, but Jason speaks one last time. He lowers his head, a gesture of true submission to her character, not just her rank. "Thank you, ma'am," he whispers. It is the ultimate satisfaction for the audience. The villain wasn't destroyed, he was cured. The hero didn't just win, she elevated everyone around her. As Melanie walks out the revolving doors and Jason turns back to his cart, we understand that this wasn't just a story about a billionaire and an assistant. It was a story about the breaking of an ego and the making of a man. Justice served, indeed. And it tasted sweeter than revenge ever could. True power isn't determined by the chair you sit in or the name on your door, it is defined solely by how you treat the people standing next to you. Jason had to lose everything to find the one thing that actually mattered, his humanity. It's a powerful reminder that while arrogance might build empires, only humility can sustain them. The tables will always turn, so make sure you're standing on the side of kindness when they do. If you believe that character is worth infinitely more than a bank account, then you have found your home. Click that subscribe button right now and join a community that values truth over hype and integrity over status. Let's build a place where the good guys finally win. Now, I have a mission for you. Hit the like button as a signal to the algorithm that we need more stories of justice in this world. In the comments, I want to know your story. Have you ever had to deal with a boss like Jason, or are you a Melanie quietly holding everything together? I read every single comment. And finally, share this video with someone who needs a reminder that karma is always watching. But don't let the inspiration stop here. This channel is a treasure chest of emotional journeys just like the one you just watched. Go explore our library of past videos. There are countless other stories of revenge, redemption, and love waiting to be discovered. And to make sure you are front row for the next emotional roller coaster, turn on that notification bell immediately. We have some incredible stories coming up that will challenge the way you see the world, and trust me, you won't want to be left out. See you in the next video.